Hmm.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom, shalom. How are you?
Doing well.
Shalom, shalom.
Shalom,
Man,
shalom.
amen. We'll just wait a few minutes, maybe a couple more people join in. So, how's everything out in the Big T?
Ah. It's beautiful today. It's so cool and it's really just peaceful. It's been beautiful the whole week, just sunshine but it's a little cloudy today and look like we're gonna get some rain. So we're hopeful that we'll get a little rain, but it's nice and cool.
Mm, 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 mm,
Mhm.
mm.
Nice and cool.
Yeah,
How
no, it's
about where you are? How's it
yeah,
going, Rabbi?
yeah, it's good. It's good. It's like it's kind of like, in my opinion, as a guy from LA, like I feel like this is like the apex of like great weather because it's like
Yeah.
it's hot, it's heating, it's like hot, but it's still like it's still like breezy and
Yeah.
it's yeah, it's nice and like and the thing about it, like Jerusalem just has this very enchanting like
Mhm.
atmosphere to it. You know what I mean? Where it's like the um it's like one of those things where I never spent time in Paris, right? But people kind of like, we hear writers, people talk about it, people talk about Paris and it's very like, like, I don't know, I mean, pseudo romantic and, kind of
Mhm.
like environment. But Israel has a different thing because it's an interesting charm about Israel because it's a combination of like extremely progressive thought, right? Like it's so much Torah learning been going on. You have so much technology. It's just it's just the whole thing, right?
Mhm.
And but then at the same time, you have all these people, tourists, this, all this, just tons of action, right? But at the same time, you have this very like ancient aspect to it, and very, you know, millennium, millennial type of a thing, meaning that like, you have thousands of years of history. And not just for Jews, but like for Christians and for Muslims and so you have that, that connection to the land too. Like when you're walking around, it's like, wow, like there were a time where there were Romans here, there were times where there were Jews here, there were times where there were Ottomans here. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
and this is like all a part of the identity. See that, and you see it in the architecture and these types of things, So like sometimes you catch yourself like walking home on Shabbat or going somewhere, and you're like, "Whoa, this is crazy." And they have a lot of markers here on the streets. So, anyways, with that being said, I and I think I told my mom this. It's like Israel is like Jerusalem is like one of those places that like if it was like LA is like one of those places. It's like you don't want LA rainy. Like everyone freaks out when it rains. No one knows how to drive. It's just like it's not like heavy rain either. It's just like it's just rain. Like we just don't like rain in LA. LA doesn't look right with rain. The beaches don't. It just doesn't. The mudslides, the whole thing, right? So, but Jerusalem's one of those places that if it had weather like LA, like it was just like the same temperature almost all the time, you would just fantasize what it would be like, what a rainy Jerusalem would be like, or what a stormy Jerusalem or a snowing Jerusalem and that. But Baruch Hashem, Hashem gives us all the seasons, and I mean, I don't know if he gets all the seasons. I don't know how much of a spring we have. I feel like we just jump into summer, but either way, it's just a
Now,
different. Go ahead.
now, just kind of springboarding off of what you just said as far as like the seasons and changing, because some places it seems like it's just the same, but really and truly seasons change, right? Now I want to ask you, just kind of, yesterday I spent some time and I was just kind of reflecting over the past, classes and so forth, and just thinking about Derek Hashem, uh and I was trying to really like get a better understanding on the aspect of authentic self versus you know um not being authentic. And I was still thinking about the situation with the example that you brought up about the sister or whatnot, and her being more, I guess, driven and corporate America type, just kind of however, whatever the perception that you had in meeting this particular person, and her speaking and verbalizing that she desires to be, a wife, homemaker, XYZ, right? And I just kind of thought about, myself and just my own journey. Um, I know for a fact that when my husband, came into my life, I desired children. I desired, a family, but maybe, I didn't have the whole understanding of what that necessarily would entail. So my question is because you're in one place at a particular season. So we're talking about, like, someone who is single, right? And so they're having to do things in order to maybe sustain themselves or whatnot in their single state. So is that um not being your authentic self, or what? How could one want to be something and they have not, they, like in this example, how could she want to be, express her authentic self as a homemaker and this and that, and you haven't made it to the hooper yet, right? Or like a doctor, someone who is, wanting to be a doctor, and yet they're in, grad school and so forth, and they're going through all the preliminaries, but maybe they have a little, side job, and that's not exactly where they desire to be. So does that, where you are currently, does that mean that you're not being your authentic self, or just because you have another desire? That's my question, Chief Rabbi.
Yeah, so that's a great question. The thing is with the authentic self, I mean, number one, it's not like every situation is unique and different, right? Like authenticity means something differently for one person versus another, right? But I would say in the case of the girl that I was speaking about, I would say like, by her, one of the biggest challenges I've seen to it with a lot of people that in everybody, okay, including myself, one of the biggest challenges as you emerge into the the Torah observance, Torah world, that you know expanded way of thinking type of a thing. There's a tendency to want to hold on to certain things that gave you security in your prior life, right? And that security that you have, it could come in different ways. Everyone thinks differently. I could say for me, it was like intellectually. I felt like I could kind of like make things the way that I wanted them to be. Even in my past relationship, I felt like you could just do it this way and that, and things just kind of like come together. And it was like all like my intellect versus accepting certain like realities, right? And so, but that was me holding on. The whole construct was me holding on to this aspect of my intellect where I felt like, I know and I could see and I, could make this happen. I made it to this point. But the thing is that it's like kind of like the difference between being like in the world and versus being outer space. Like when we're in the world, we have the rules, we have gravity, we have all these different rules that exist in this reality that we're in. But once we go outer space, there's a different set of rules. Or even say like when we're in our mother's womb, there's a certain set of rules of how we live. And then once we're out of our mother's womb, there's a different set of rules. So when you go into the Torah world, into the Jewish dynamic, because it's like you absorb all of these people as well, right? And all this stuff becomes it's like it was already who you were, but now it's revealed, so the connectivity is there. And so, now you're challenged. Like, I mean, it really is. It's what it's intellectually because we're discussing it right now. But this is our lives, right? And so, um, And so I would say that like the strength and the ability that a person has to let themselves go, and to travel into completely unfamiliar spaces and take on completely new things and seeing life and all these different things. It's like that is like the ultimate like strength of a person. And so I would say that that authentic self is is that self that you currently manifest right now. The person that you are right now, right? Now, based off of the environment, we may present that person in different ways, right? So like say like a person, they go away to college, and then they come back for spring break, right? They went to college, they changed a lot, they met new people, they learned new things, traveled, whatever, and they come back and see their friends. And they see their friends, and some of their friends didn't leave for school, they stayed home, they kind of do the same things, whatever. And the friends kind of like make jokes. I mean, I could say by myself, I mean, like I haven't seen people in a long time since I've been in Israel, but I just remember even when I was back in LA, I would run into people that I grew up with. They'd be like, "Hey, you remember we did this? You remember we did that? You remember we did this?" And you're just like, "Yeah, kinda," that type of a thing, right? And so the point is the same, but sometimes you have a tendency to kind of want to joke and to kind of like act, in that way of that way that you were in the past, right? And then that same way, depending on your environment, it may not even have to do with your past. You just may act in a certain way that you feel, like sometimes you meet people that, grew up in very traumatic environments, right? Where there was a lot of judgment, a lot of scrutiny. So, they're very sensitive about people. Like, sometimes they call themselves empaths, right? Like they're very sensitive, they can feel people because they had to grow up. That was a form of survival, right? And so they would kind of like contour their personality to deal with their parents at whatever level that their parents were expressing themselves, right? But that never allowed them to really develop their own self, right? Because they're always like walking on eggshells, right? So the thing is the saying like this authentic self idea is to say that the person that I am now is my authentic self. Now, me expressing that and how I communicate that to the world, even to myself, right? You know, that determines, if I'm expressing how I do that determines if I'm leading with my authentic self or if I'm leading by the manufactured self, right? And the manufactured self is a response to safety, right? I need to be safe because of this. So that particular girl, I would say her biggest challenge is that she's too close to her family, and her mom cannot guide her, in this new world that she's in, right? And they want to keep her close because she's a very talented person. But the thing is like she has to go, she has to figure out who she is, and she has to live that life. She has to live that authentic life, not the person that, went to college and was, this type of person, like, this whole thing now. And she knows that. And that's why, she's, but anyways, but the point is that that's her thing, that's her thing. But the point is saying it's not so much that like I'm saying I'm dating now, right? And and there's girls that you go out on dates with and they're moms. You know what I'm saying? Like this is a mom. I know that this girl's a mom. I know that this is the whole thing. I mean, obviously, whatever, but I'm just saying everything leads that way, right? Everything leads that way. And to be honest with you, even with my ex, it wasn't like so much like I was like, oh, well, she's gonna be such a great mom. I was just into her. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like I was into her. I was into her brilliance. And I'm not saying she isn't going to be a great mom or anything like that. God forbid she's going to be a great mom. But I'm just saying that wasn't really at that stage. And I know it sounds weird to say that, but I wasn't in that stage. I was still like thinking much younger, And it was just like, ah, man, this girl, she's dope. And this, and, she's brilliant, Taurus scholar, all this type of stuff. But the point is just saying that the point that I'm saying that is like you evolve and you grow, and there's different types of girls. Like there's girls that I'm friends with that, I mean, you could marry, but they're not necessarily wives. You know what I mean? And could they be mothers? Yeah, I mean, it's a natural instinct for a Jewish woman to be a mom. You know what I mean? Like it's community, it's a lot of support around it. But some girls, that's not really their thing. You know what I mean? Will they have a kid? Yeah, they have a kid. But you know what I mean? But there's some girls. So it just depends where you're at as a guy, right? And where your development is as a guy, you know? And but I'm saying at the end of the day, you can't rearrange the will, you know? Like you got like if you're ready to go, you're ready to go. Like, it's like you see a play, right? And there's people on stage and there's people behind the stage that are waiting for their cue to go on, right? And it's just like if you're not ready to go on stage, if you're not ready, and I'm talking about like creating a life, you know what I mean? Because it's like when you're talking about like a Jewish family, we're talking about like kids that are, you know, we're talking about kids that could like potentially open a yeshiva one day. You know, kids that could come up with an innovative idea that thousands of people, I mean, we're talking about unbelievable levels of mitzvahs, could just come from one kid. One kid, you could be in the highest levels of heavens just from one kid, one grandkid, one great grandkid. He could lift up the whole situation, right? This is how big we're talking. We're talking about the world to come, the next world, right? So the person you marry, the kids that you have, the way that they raise, the whole thing, it's like it's not just doing the mitzvah puravu. It's like no, you could create a dynasty. The world is changing. We're going to the reality of the world beyond AI, and that's kind of like what I want to talk about a little bit. But the point just on this subject is just saying like it's such a huge thing because we're talking about mitzvahs, right? We're talking about the only reason why we're created as human beings. So, if a guy like me just hits a base hit, I'm not saying a double or triple or home run or even a grand slam. Okay, I'm shooting for grand slam. But if I just hit the base hit, I'm out. It's a game over, right? I was talking to a guy, a friend of mine, and he, he's also African American, also a guy who, converted into Judaism. He's a very powerful guy, and he was in the same thing. He's talking to a girl, wasn't really, you know, Jewish girl, but knew a lot of Torah, this type of Bible type stuff. But the point is just saying, I even said by him, it's just like, in the secular world, they have this idea called power couples, right? Where it's two people and they match incomes and you know, they make 250,000, 350, 325,000. You're right, power couple, right? He's a lawyer, she's a doctor, vice versa, whatever, something like this, right? Power couple, they go on vacations, they always have pictures, they go to restaurants, maybe they have a kid, maybe two kids, this type of thing. Right? This is what we're presented with. This is reality, right? But in the Torah, a power couple, right? A power couple is a couple where there's a home that's full of kedusha, full of holiness because of mitzvahs, because of Torah study, because of shalom bayis, and because of that, the husband is able to go out and conquer in the world and create and manifest and draw goodness and prosperity to take back to his home and community in the world. That's the power couple in Judaism. The power couple in Judaism is like, hey, we're about to blast off on Shabbos. We had our heart.
Okay.
Go ahead, go
I
ahead.
want to say something. Okay, so it's like I just kind of thought like, it's interesting because like even though you are in a present state, but that authentic self is still present in different ways. It may not be complete like the full scope, kind of like at the introduction how I talked about the well set garden, how it has the flower beds, the path and all of those things and so forth. I mean, you may start off and you just have the one bed, but you're progressing towards this. And I can remember, it's interesting because I can actually remember where it wasn't necessarily at my husband's initiative where I said, you know what, I need to make a career change because our oldest daughter, me working in news, I was there all night long after the nightly news. And I was like, I can't do this. And so it's as if, my authentic self was really right there saying this, I'm moving this direction. But even once I got the, you know, um, 8 to 5 job, my husband, he's like, listen, I really, really want you to be at home with the children. And though it wasn't, the easiest decision, but I had already started to make that move. And so, um, I guess what I'm getting is that your authentic self is, if you're saying something and that's who you really are, then there's going to be some evidence. It may not be fully manifested, but it's going to be some evidence that that's what you really desire.
100%. And so I was shocked.
So
Yeah, yeah, no. So yeah, so exactly. And in the case of the girl that we're talking about, like I said, I talked to her, and then I got that insight just by knowing her. You know what I'm saying? Like I was married at the time when I was talking to her, but I'm just saying, like the point is saying I was able to get that insight that she's not really that corporate girl. She's actually this girl. She specifically is not my personal connection, but the point is just I'm saying as someone who cares about her, I'm saying that as a human being, it's saying that like you see her in her situation, you see like, wow, like, it makes you look at yourself, and you say like, well, how much of like like the girls that like for example, like I said the other night on Shabbat, we had like close to 100 people here for like Oneg, right? And so there was a lot of girls, a lot of singles, different girls, and you could just look in the room, you could say, okay, well, this girl, she's not like girls that are like give the impression that they're homemakers are not seeking a lot of attention. You know what I'm saying? Like that's not really their thing per se. That's not to say that there aren't girls that do seek attention, aren't homemakers, but I'm saying generally in the religious environments, girls that are more outspoken, I mean, obviously, I mean, everyone's a homemaker. Okay, let me not take that away from you. But what I'm saying is saying that there's a certain depth of connection that can be achieved as a Jew, meaning that when I accept how the world was created, when I accept the purpose of creation, when I accept my role in creation, right? And how creation, you know, in how creation and myself interact with each other, right? Like we were talking about the weather earlier today, and I think maybe it was yesterday, day before, I don't remember. But we were just talking about this idea of how, and it's something I was learning with Otina, with the Ramchal, is this idea of being able to look at the brilliance of the fact that God's presence is concealed, right? And how, because of the fact that God's presence is concealed, in this reality that we have to search for God, and through the searching for God, we realize that God was always around us, which allows us to connect to the perfection of creation. But even more past that, right? Even more past that, we see how eccentric our existence and everything we see around her are intricately locked together, right? And so the thing is that element that element is is a very a very powerful realization, right? Now, with that being said, right, there's this idea of the original creation of man and woman, right? And the original creation of man and woman are like linked together, right? And then there's another understanding of creation, and these different dynamics as well. But the thing is like this, you know, the thing is to say that that connection of serving God creates an additional dimension to any type of physical experience, right? Like a person's in a marathon, right? And they're running in a marathon, and they're like saying like basically like they're going to use a marathon as a way of tshuva, as a way of using their legs in the right way. Maybe they spent their life running to do sins, and they're going to say, hey, you know what? I'm gonna run. I'm gonna do for charity, and I'm gonna take that charity, and I'm gonna give it, and all this is to serve God and to use my legs the right way to help people, right? I mean, that's a random concept, but the point is just saying that running is at a much different level than a person who's running because they want to beat a personal time, right? Or they have a personal challenge, right? And so when you talk about the relationship between man and woman, the levels that can be achieved through serving God, right? And I'm just talking about in conversations and even serving this, all these different things that relationships have. When there's this dynamic of serving God, it's a completely high reality, right? It's a whole nother energy, right? You're creating souls in the heavens, right? And so the thing is that the challenge is that not everybody sees relationships in life in that way. You know what I'm saying? Some people have been through a lot of difficulties in life and they don't trust and this and traumas and this and all types of crazy experiences and closets of stuff. And that's okay. That's okay. But that person who has those issues is going to have to go out and deal with those things independently, right? It's not okay that they're just there and you just react accordingly based off of, impulse. It's like, no, that's not how a family works. And these behavior patterns are destructive, right? And so in order to create this shalom bias, this is what I signed up for. I didn't sign up to be a part of a club. I didn't sign up to like just chill and say, hey, I'm Jewish, I'm part of the team, and I got my certificate, and hey, I'm here. I never said I met the Rav Berg. That was my introduction to Judaism. This guy was trying to fix the whole system. You know what I'm saying? Like that's my introduction to spirituality outside of my parents. Right. And a lot of my parents, their spirituality was like rooted in healing. They were trying to deal with their stuff growing up, this whole thing, which wasn't necessarily fully what I related to because I grew up with a different life than they did. Right. But nevertheless, the point is the saying that I didn't come into Judaism to chill. I didn't come into Judaism to hang out. Like I was good. I was good on my pseudo Islamic path. It was good. I'm chilling. I'm this. I'm the guy. I'm like Will Smith from the suburbs. But the point is, you're just saying that like so. But it was truth. I got seduced by truth, right? I talked about that. But the point is just all I'm saying is that all I'm saying is that when we talk about the spiritual system of the Torah, and we talk about when you're talking about partnership, whether it's friendships that you have with people, partnerships like me and Otan, we learned Ron Paul, and one thing about Ron Paul, him and his crew, they create their own community, and they created their own community, they created their own guidelines, and it was all based around like working on themselves and this type of thing. But you got to choose where you want to be at. You know what I mean? And that, you know what I mean? And then also in my position of leadership and the things that I'm doing, you know, when you start your path, a lot of times, everything's institution, right? You're at this place, this school, this place, this type of things. But there's another, and it's good because there's a lot of support. There's a big network, it's a whole thing. But there's a lot of other things that come along with institutionalized dynamics, right? Meaning that like, well, oh, Mordecai is working with Chief Rabbi Pinchas in the African rabbinute, and a lot of people may not agree with that, inside the Jewish community, right? And they don't really know him per se. They know me, right? And so they see what he's doing, and a lot of people don't like it. So instead of coming to you directly, they could go to your wife, right? And go in there and be like, oh, well, what about this? And why he's doing this? And this doesn't make sense. And you know what I mean? And now that's a whole nother level of politics that you never even thought about, right? You never even thought about that. You never even thought like, wow, like who I marry determines who gets into my house, right? And if you have people that are in the system, that means the system can come into your house, right? And if you have kids and your kids are also in the system, that is another hand inside of your home, right? So you have to choose wisely, right? You can't just be like, oh, this girl, wow, look how beautiful she is. You got to be very clear about who your associations are going to be and what environments you're going to be in. who's going to be around. All these things matter. It's not just a girl you're looking at like, oh, okay, well, she's cool and she's not cool. No, it's a whole ramification. And then not only that, you have to be engaged, right? We have to be engaged. I mean, I'm involved, with everybody, right? So we want to empower those relationships, right? Not take away, not self-sabotage ourselves, not create drama, not do silly stuff bro. Like I mean, we're about, we're with the president. You know what I mean? Like, come on, let's move forward, right? So the point is saying people have to be healthy on a deeper level when you're trying to make moves and create things around kedusha. If you're just in the Hollywood, you could just have a trophy wife, right? Hey, bro, she used to be an actress. It didn't work. Now, I met her. We got married. She's beautiful. Look at my kids. They look great. Hey, Thanksgiving picture. We send it out to everybody, right? Okay, you could do that. Your wife's doing whatever. You don't know. They got TV shows, Desperate Housewives, right? Everyone's making money in the thing. They're all making money, all the guys. So in that world, you could, yeah, whatever. You're out, you're making your money. But like when you enter the world of Kedusha, right? It's a different set of rules. It's a different set of connections. And so when you go in that dynamic of different, when I say different set of rules, I'm talking about how things manifest in your life. I'm not talking about social norms. I'm saying I'm saying you have a desire and you want that desire to manifest on your kitchen table. Okay. So what are the processes of getting there? Before you could go out and steal, right? You could go out, you could steal, and then you have money and you go to the store, you go shopping, you bring food, right? So it doesn't matter how you treat people, how you do things, whatever. No, you steal. What do you mean? You got the money and you went and bought, right? But the problem with that is that when you enter this other world and you have those mentalities, the food that you bought is now rotten. The food that you brought into your house is going to make you and your kids sick, God forbid, right? Everything that comes from that money that you spend is going to rot, right? So like that's a different set of rules, and there's not a university for those rules, right? Like now that you entered the kedusha, now you entered the covenant. There's a different set of rules, right? And so when you enter that world of different set of rules, you have to have a different type of wife. You know what I'm saying? And I'm not criticizing my situation or anyone else's. I'm just saying you had to have a certain type of wife because you gotta make moves because everyone's coming at you. They want to take you out. No one's your friend. No one's your friend. You're a concept, right? I'm not a rapper. I'm not a singer. I'm not a basketball player. I teach, you know what I'm saying? So it's a whole different thing. And so the decisions and I mean, no one prepares you for that. No one prepares you for that, and it's like, okay, you meet a girl, she likes you, but that's not enough. Is she loyal to you? How is she going to deal with conflicts? How does she deal with pressure? Right? When there's discrimination happening, how is she going to respond to that? Is she going to be the one that jumps in front of everybody with the M16, or is she the one who runs behind and be like, hey, ain't got nothing to do with me? You know what I'm saying? So these are a whole nother set of things. And just because of someone's ethnicity doesn't mean they're about that life. Oftentimes in non-black spaces, when you see black people, they are low-key anti-black. You know what I'm saying? Like I'm not saying this by anybody that we're talking about, but I'm just saying in general, like you'll notice that they're there because they're anti-black. You know what I'm saying? Or anti-Hispanic or anti-whatever. You know what I mean? They're in those circles for that reason. Again, I met the Rob Berg. I met the Kabalson. I met Yehuda Berg. I met Michael Berg. I met Karen Berg. That's who I met. My family came.
You know, oh, you read about may I speak?
Go ahead, please.
Okay. That makes me think about just when I met my wife. Um prior to meeting my wife, there was a couple of young ladies that I was, that I would date as like almost like in from the aspect of interviews, because I had set a standard of what I wanted and how I wanted to live as far as holiness was concerned. And what I found was there were young ladies that I would, tell them how this is how I live. This is because I was a minister at the time, and this is how I live. This is what I don't do. This is what I do. And through those dating processes, I was eliminating them because over a period of time, they would try to cross those boundaries. And it was like, we're not married, and these boundaries are trying to be crossed. You're trying to test the waters. And for me, that was like, hey, no, this is not, we're not going to be able to make it. I can't trust you. And when I got to my wife, I met my wife. What I found was that with my wife, there was even a higher level of restriction. And not only restriction, but also Hashem allowed her to see my weaknesses, right? And instead of her trying to manipulate or use them against me, she would stand there and try to help me correct these things. And initially, I didn't like that. That made me uncomfortable. It made me very uncomfortable. And it wasn't, until a little while that I began to understand, hey, this is my wife. Because this, she's not going to, um, uh, she's not going to, she loves Hashem, right? And so it was more so like, hey, this is what I need, because the road that I'm going on, the journey that I have, I need a Sarah. I need a Sarah. I can't, afford to have children, I don't really like using this word a whole lot. I don't need a Jezebel, you know. And so it's kind of like, I'm real careful using that word like that, but her name like that. But God gave me a Sarah, that is going to stick with me through turbulent times, and so that's what I want to say. So it's I understand exactly what you're saying, and I think that it's important that we actually look at take that aspect in every aspect of life, even with certain opportunities that we might have in life. Is this something that is going to benefit me? Is this something that's going to work against me in being who I truly am in my authentic self? So
Yeah, yeah, no, it's good. And the thing is, on that point, is just saying that, and this is like, when we have these conversations and we have this like open talks, it's like, it's for us to be able to see that, like, we're working, our life is the Torah. We're working with the Torah on every stage, everything. I'm telling you, I went out on this date the other night. I don't know if I told you this. Maybe I told you this. But anyway, so I went on this date the other night, and it was this girl, and she was Ashkenaz, right? And good girl, whatever. She's in seminary here, type of thing. She's like, I don't know, like 31, 32, something like this. Anyway, so we went out, and we had a good time, whatever, right? And so we were just talking, and then before we actually went out to eat, she's like, "Yeah, I want to, let's talk." We sat down at the bench, whatever, and she starts explaining to me the connections between African Americans and the tribes of Israel. I'm not kidding you. Like, I'm not kidding you. And this is just girls. She's like, and I'm just sitting there. I'm just like, and I'm just sitting there listening to this, and I'm just like, wait, all right. Either two things are going on right now. Either she's saying this because someone's telling her to say this to me, to see what my response is going to be, right? Like, I'm going to like go get really triggered and be like, yeah, and this and blah, 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 right? Like, that's one scenario, right? I'm just saying what I got to do, because Chief Rabbi Pinchas, rabbis, all these other guys, they're married, right? So they went off and became rabbis and, have certain levels of status or whatever. I'm the most visible of all of them, right? And I'm single, right? So you don't know who's coming at you. And you don't know why. You don't know what the agenda is. Like, I wish it was just like it's not like that anymore. Back in the day, it was like that. You just, whatever. But now it's not. So anyway, so she's explaining this whole thing to me. And so it's like one scenario is like, this is like a calculated conversation, right? That's one point. Or God is trolling me. You know what I mean? Like he just make it fun. And it really turns out that like she really genuinely had no clue. She still doesn't, I don't even think even know like about my connection with it. Go ahead.
See, Rabbi.
Yeah.
You can run, but you can't hide, man. Yeah. You can run, but you can't hide.
Hey, but that, everything's early in the game. But the point is just saying that. It was just interesting. Like God was just like, and and the thing about it, she was so serious about it. She thought she was freeing me in the conversation. Like she was like really trying to explain it to me, like how this happened and tribes went into Africa, and this. I'm like, have you seen it? Like I'm like, where's this coming from? Like what that? I don't need to deal with this right now, right? And so. But it was just a really funny experience, and then the funny thing about it, I met this girl like 3 months before that, maybe even 4 months before that, and I was just looking at her, and we were at like a meal, and I just looked over and I was like, I can't deal with this. I'm done. Like I just have a thing. I'm just like, you know what, maybe I need to be more in the ethnic side. You know what I mean? Anyway, but so I was, but it was a humbling experience with this person. I don't know if we're going to go out again. I don't know. We haven't talked since. But the point is just saying is that it was a humbling experience because it reminded me that you don't know who's behind that face, right? And one of the things that we're learning in our shir is this idea of prophecy, right? And how prophecy is understood. And I just want to just touch on just a few points. Okay. Okay. So I just want to touch on a few points just to kind of like, just get a little bit more leeway to our end. But the thing is like this. So where we're at now is like I meet this girl and she's like that. See, I got single guy Torah now. You know what I mean? So it's a whole new era, right? But the thing is, so I meet this girl and the person who's on the outside is not the person who's on the inside. And a lot more information came out too, by the way. But it's just saying that it's that idea, right? And so this idea is similar to what we're doing around call. Now, this particular sefer that me and OTN are learning is extremely controversial because it's a really at this stage. I don't know if the whole sefer is built around this, but this whole book is built around how to understand prophecy, right? And he says prophecies come to prophets and it comes to certain souls. And so one of the things he talks about, so it's a very controversial idea because there's another school of thought, and this is a school of thought I had before I learned the sefer, right? Before I learned the sefer, I was under the school of thought that, hey, a prophet is a person who receives a message from God, and basically they open their mouth and it's God speaking, or whatever they do is basically God is using them as a vehicle, right? And the Ramchal, he takes a different perspective based off of the teachings of the Rambam, which is the fact that the prophet sees the prophecy, he sees the images, and then that information of the images is inscribed into his heart. And from this process of sight to heart is what the prophet gives over to the people. And so he's explaining that process of how that works. And he's explaining this idea of sight and energies, right? So he's saying when you see it, when a prophet has a vision, he basically says that the prophet who has a vision, the prophet who has a vision of a particular image, but that image is representing a specific energy. That specific energy, he's referring to it as a spirit, right? And so he says, as the prophet understands the quality of that particular light, he's able to translate what it is that God is trying to communicate, right? So we're going to read a little bit of, I don't know if this is the exact part, but it's in the same thing. So he says, Has Sphirot Ne'or. So he says, the form of which the soul, this is chapter 9, okay? So we're already like far gone. I think we did chapter 10 yesterday, so we're already in chapter 11, right? So this is a review in a way. So he's saying the form in which the Sphirot appears is spiritual. Yet, even this is not part of their eccentric essence, right? But only the form in which it appears seen through the looking glass of Malchut, right? So the thing that he brings in this conversation, a revolutionary thought he brings in this conversation, is to understand that everything that we're viewing, everything that we're experiencing is from the world of Malchut, right? Right. So we know we have the four different worlds, right? And those different worlds are Asalut, Bria, Yitzira, and Anasia, right? And then you have the 10 spheros, which is Keter Chochmah Bina, Hesed, Gevurah, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and the bottom one, Malchut, right? So Malchut is the physical world, the world of action, right? And that physical world of action is the world that we live in, the world of, requires action, right? And so he's saying that when a prophet has this vision, or a unique soul has this vision, a prophetic vision, he has to understand that he's not looking at the essence itself, but rather a fraction understanding of that vision based off of the fact that he's in this limited frame of reality, which is Malchut, in terms of limited perception. He says, Afal pi sheni ra'im hade yevonot be'sfirot. She says, although the spherotes appear in the form, even so, form seen is not like the physical form. What is seen is something that is understood as if in a lower world. This is called vision of the soul, right? So this is kind of like this idea of the authentic self. This is a deeper understanding of that. So he's going to break down our ability to comprehend in two frames. There's the ability to comprehend from the frame of the intellect, and then there's a frame of understanding it from the frame of seeing from the frame of the soul, right? So he's saying like this, and we're seeing with both. We're only usually aware of the frame of the intellect. So he says, although the Sphirot appeared in the form of likeness, even so, the form seen is not like a form. What is seen is something that is understood as if one saw that form in a lower world. This is called the vision of the soul, whose vision is not like the vision of the body. Accordingly, the subject of the prophetic visions do not necessarily appear in the same way as the corresponding physical objects would appear to the physical eye. He says, what is seen by the soul is the shining light that is understood as the circle, igul. If what is seen is a circle or as a straight line, if what is seen in the vision is straight, the same applies to all other forms of images seen by the soul. So the idea, so he's understanding the way to explain the spiritual reality. He explains it from the frame of a circle and from the frame of a straight line. A circle is what we've been talking about this whole time of seeing the perfection of God. We've been learning that in Derek Hashem, right? And the perfection of God is seeing the deficiencies as being a catalyst to the connection, right? So when we see that connection, we see the perfection of God. That's the circle. When we talk about the elevation to higher and lower levels, that's the straight line, right? So he's saying that. So he's saying that these two frames is the undertone of the shapes that are being presented to the prophet, that they're symbolizing either this idea of a message based around this circular perfection, which has many, many levels to it, or the straight line. So he says the same applies to all the other forms or images seen by the soul. It is not that the actual physical form is seen. Even the spiritual form that is seen is not the eccentric essence of the Sphirot themselves, but only in the way it appears through Malchut, right? Through the sunglasses of Malchut. He says, which these powers, which shows these powers in a way. Now, you guys remember this because this is the same message that we learned about Rav Ashlag, right? When we learn about the Sphirot, right, we're just learning about the expression of them. The internal essence of them is beyond our logic. It's connected to the Ein Sof, right? So we're only dealing with the external aspects. And now he's taking a step further because he's talking about the prophetic experience with the Sphirot, which Rav Ashlag is not talking about, right? He's talking about the prophetic aspect, and the prophetic aspect is that. So I don't want to go so much into that, but I do want to utilize this idea of the seeing of the intellect and the seeing of the soul, right? Because it's meaning that we are always seeing the physical and we're also seeing the spiritual. But now Ramchal is giving us language to understand that. So the physical that we see with the eyes, the physical eyes. When we look in the mirror, we see our eyes. But the aspect of the 99%, we're seeing that, hearing that, and feeling that all the time as well. So in the same way that we have the five senses that function in the frame of the body, we also have a corresponding expression of that with our soul. Right here, he's talking about the eyes because he's specifically talking about prophecy. But when we walk into a room and we feel a bad energy, that is the knowledge of our soul. When we listen to somebody and we can hear that they're not being truthful or they're really saying something else, that's the listening of our soul, right? When we look at things and we see that. So like when I was looking at that girl the other night when we went out, I was just looking at her from the aspect of the intellect. Because if I would have really connected, really was connected, I would say like, hey, you know what, this person wants to hang out with me. You know, they want to go out, they want to get to know me. So there's something deep there. Why, you know, what's going on, right? Now, I didn't think it was going to turn out to be that, but the point is just saying that those two things are happening all the time, right? And when we talk about the authentic self, it's not just the aspect of leading with my true desires in that particular moment, right? It's also listening. It's also feeling. It's also hearing with that authentic self, because our authentic self is more connected to the neshama, right? The intellectual self, a lot of it is built around, you know, trauma, right? Different mechanisms of survival, right? So that aspect of the authentic self, right, is something that we have to really think about, not just leading with in terms of us being aware of it, but activating the authentic self, right? Because the authentic self is always going to lead us the right way. The authentic self has all the desires of our soul connected to it. Because sometimes, I mean, how many things that we do have we done throughout our life that has damaged us? You know, that wasn't connected to the authentic self. You know, people we hung out with, decisions we made, we compromised ourselves. We compromised our values. We compromised our integrity to fit in or to be accepted or thinking we were going to achieve, you know, something, whatever. So the authentic self won't allow that to happen. The strengthening of the authentic self won't allow. They'd be like, no, that's not for me, right? And as you go up in your leadership, all you have is your authentic self because you're going to be challenged every single way. You know, once people start calling you, you know, rabbi, you know, they're really saying like, hey, like people I walk down and say like, rabbi, you know, this type of thing, right? But what they're really saying is, hey, Mr. Example of the Torah, you're supposed to be an example of the Torah, even as a single man, even more so, right? So you're Mr. Example of the Torah. When you go out on a date, you're an example of the Torah. When you send a text message, you're the example of the Torah. There's no time off, right? There's no like, you know, I'm this way over here and I'm this way. No, no, no. Everyone's watching everywhere I go. I go to the supermarket, everyone's watching. They're saying if I'm buying this, is he buying alcohol? What is he doing? What is he buying at the store? And I'm not saying it's not because it's me. This is everybody who's in these leadership positions, right? Anyone that God puts in a position to say that I believe that you're strong enough to represent aspects of my will in this world, right? Or you're going to inspire other people to do the same, right? But the point is just saying is like that's what we're dealing with, right? And so all these things have to be taken into account when you're making moves because a lot of guys get caught up. Look at Puffy. There had to be a point in Sean Combs' life that if he would have met a Rabbi Mordecai or any of the people listening, you guys, you know, if he would have met us at a certain stage in his life, the whole story could be different. He could be feeding 1 million people in Africa right now, in Asia. He could be building orphanages, you know, all over the world. He could be doing all these types of things. Instead, he's in jail right now, you know, with his kids having to walk around hearing about their dad and his freak offs. Right? Same thing by Kanye. All right, bro, you made your point. You got nasty. You got evil. You cussed everybody out. You told them how you felt, and you didn't hold back one bit. All right, now what? Your kids still got to deal with Jews. You know what I'm saying? Like they still got to be in the environment. You could close yourself off. You know, Kim still got to deal with it. And you told him, but it's like again, I mean that's not where it's at, but it's leadership training though. It's leadership training at this level, at the high level of leadership training, which is like, it's just like, I mean, did Martin Luther King have leadership training? And Malcolm X? I mean, they were great leaders, but were they in the metaphysic world? Were they in the Torah world? Were they in the mitzvahs? I don't know. I don't know. People get sensitive when I do that, but I'm just saying, like, I'm not. I'm with everybody. I mean, these are my, ancestors. I'm just saying they didn't have access to what I had. They didn't have them that came before me. You know what I mean? Like I have them. I have, all these great leaders that come from my community, right? Where they had great leaders, but not at the magnitude of Martin Luther King or Malcolm X in terms of like visibility around the world, Marcus Garvey and, these guys are big. And there's always been black leaders in America. But anyway, the point is just saying, like, we got to make good decisions out here, and I tell a lot of these guys, the key to making good decisions is purity. A lot of these guys, and we'll close off on this point. A lot of guys spend their time looking at images of women on the internet. But that is number one, you're over, you're over, you know, you know, I mean, you're over certain Torah and rabbinical prohibitions, but the main thing is that a guy who spends his time looking at women is basically a guy who is in a place of fantasy, right? Because he's looking at things that are not his, that he has not acquired, right? Through marriage, through Kiddushin, right? He hasn't done that, right? So he's looking at things that are not his. And he's fantasizing and he's having thoughts, these perverted, sick thoughts of things that are not connected to the Torah, right? And so he's spending hours doing that every day. Now, what that does is it creates a man who cannot make good decisions. It cannot lead. How? Because fantasy is a muscle, just like reality is a muscle, right? And the more that you strengthen the muscle of reality, you'll be able to make decisions in reality. If you live in a world of fantasy, you'll make decisions. Fantasy. Like, for example, you'll see people say, like, in business, right? They start talking about like a particular part, whatever the opportunity is, and they'll just start creating stories about what can happen and this, and if this works out this way, and this, and you're just like, wait. But you got to sign the contract. You know what I mean? Like you got to do X, Y, and Z. So the point is it's just to really kind of like just think these things out, and to really think these things out and to be rooted in reality and not to be in fantasy. And part of, that is not looking at the physical and thinking you understand the totality, right? And I just use that situation with the girl as an example, right? And then we use the example of the other girl as an example. Two different ethnicities, right? One, you know, is explaining to me about blackness. The other one's, But anyways, everyone should have success. The sister we're talking about, she's a very good person, and she should get married very soon. And her success is all of our success. Like Kanye says, when Beyonce win, we all win. So we want her to be successful. There's a lot of singles that are there, and it's the single grind is a grind for a lot of people, and a lot of it is like self-esteem and self-perception. And so I'm just coming in, and I'm just like, whoa, you guys got to pick it up, make it happen, and then my last final point is like this. And it's just on the whole single scene. And one day I'm going to write about this, because I got to do a book on this, you know what I mean? Just so like, so process I went through in terms of relationships, marriage, and the growth around it and understanding. I think people could benefit. But, one of the things that's really, I believe, destroyed so much of dating in the Jewish world is this concept of soulmate. or Besheret or Zivu. You hear these words. And these are very Kabbalistic concepts that people have took about two souls that come down and then, they link up and it's like all these amazing things happen. And so a lot of people are in this mindset of this fantasy, right? And it's this fantasy of the special person that's going to come and this and all that. And it's just like, yes, first of all, you're going to attract who you are, number one. And number two is you're going to attract who you are. And then also, there's a very practical component to marriage, right? For me, because I wasn't clear, going into what is Jewish marriage. I know my parents' marriage was, but I didn't know what a Jewish marriage was. It was just a very different mechanism, right? It's a whole different observances, thinkings, all this stuff. So, anyways, the point is just saying that there's a very practical aspect of marriage, which is enjoying the moments. Out of all the billions of people on planet Earth, you guys, everyone that, people listening, anyone's in a relationship, anyone's married and having Shabbat tonight, they're going to be spending that Shabbat with someone who loves them. And they love God, right? And when you think about how special that is, that you were able to find another human being that is fulfilling the purpose of creation with you. They may not be as into it as you, they may not be as scholarly as you, but they're down for the ride, right? And they're down to not impede your ability to ride, right? And so that in itself is such a huge accomplishment, right? And when you're lighting candles and you're saying kiddush and you're saying, hamotzi, you just have to really take in the specialness of that moment. And that specialness of that moment is because you're sharing it, right? You're sharing it. And a lot of that sharing has to do with like how you live your week, right? You can't like live foul during the week and then come to Shabbat and think, that's not how it works. So when you're out there, like a guy like who's in my position, who's out there looking, those are the details. Like, can you live with this person? Can you have fun with this person? You prepare for Shabbos. What is it going to be like? You got holidays. What's it going to be like? Community. What is it going to be like? And these are like normal things. These aren't like over the top, inquiries. You know what I mean? These are like right there, right? So, anyways, the point is just saying that it's the details, but it's not just the details of acquisition, because that's where I'm at as a single man. Details of acquisition. There's also details of acquired, right? That I have acquired these things in my partner. And when I look over at night, when I look over the Shabbos table, when I look over that and I look at the children, or I look at the future children that are going to sit in the chairs, right? When those things exist, I got to know that I made it. This is the highest level. It's not the palace in Europe with a 15-foot, 20-foot long table with all the big chickens on it and all. No, that's not it. It's a simple Shabbos with challah and wine, and people loving each other and sanctifying a day that God said was holy. That's it. It's the simplicity of that. And so when you put in all these like soulmates and zivugs and all that, that basic practicality of appreciation of what you have, right, is not there, and that can lead you astray, right? So anyway, so the blessing to all you guys, just to enjoy, have shalom bias. Shalom bias is the key. Happiness is the key. Compromise, to get to that place is the key, and just enjoying life. Shabbat shalom. Baruch atah Adonai, le'olam.